Tonight we drift back through the crooked, cobbled arteries of 18th century Paris, where the perfume is overwhelming, the sore grates we steam, and there's something suspiciously soft squishing in your boot. But if you follow your nose, it's not always bad news. Sometimes it leads to a wedge of Roquefort tucked under a striped awning or a cheese cart rolling by with bells that chime like a bakery dream. Because tonight's story, it's about cheese. And not just any cheese, but the kind that required an entire city to invent pocket maps just to survive its fermented frenzy. You probably won't survive this as a lactose-intolerant time traveler, but don't worry, you won't be alone. Hundreds of thousands in powdered wigs and petticoats are already elbowing their way down Rue Mouffetard, sniffing like truffle pigs for aged Brie and oozing Morne d'Or. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin your stroll at the Pont Neuf, dodging a carriage and slipping past a toothless man selling warm chestnuts. Paris in the 1700s is a different kind of chaos. No cars, sure, but the noise is relentless. Dogs bark, vendors shout, violins whine from open windows, and underneath it all lies the unmistakable tang of old cheese baking in the sun. By this time, cheese isn't just food. It's a pillar of city life, part sustenance, part social code, and definitely a political weapon. Rich folks nibble blue-veined wedgies from porcelain plates, while laborious chomp waxy chunks with hunks of black bread. And everyone, no matter their station, has an opinion about which street sells the real Brie de Meaux. You turn onto Rue Saint-Honoré and nearly get bowled over by a boy sprinting past, holding a folded bit of paper. A pocket map. You catch a glimpse before he vanishes into the crowd, tiny sketches of cheese wheels drawn next to street corners, weird little symbols, and a short list of dates. This isn't a map for getting around. It's a cheese itinerary. See, by the mid-1700s, Paris is absolutely riddled with fromage. There's no refrigeration yet, so cheeses travel in fast-moving carts or tuck into alley-side cellars, each neighborhood developing its own favorite ferment. And the stench? Monumental. Parisians with money mask it with cologne. Those without just get used to the taste of moldy air. Even back then, people are trying to organize the madness. Maps start circulating, not official ones, mind you. These are hand-drawn, passed between friends or sold quietly at cafes. You can imagine the first person pulling one from a coat pocket, nodding toward a particular corner of the Marais and whispering, "The goat cheese from the Widow Marchande? Right here. Only Thursdays. Don't be late." One popular theory says the very first cheese maps were created by desperate apprentices working for taverns. They'd be sent out at dawn to find the ripest, strongest wheels, and after enough wrong turns and scoldings, they started marking down routes and noting which vendors had deals or shouted less. It worked. And soon enough, these scrawled parchment maps became a kind of underground navigation system, especially for foodies who didn't want to follow the same smelly wagon tracks as everyone else. Historians still argue whether these early maps were ever officially banned, since they technically promoted unlicensed trade, but most agree that by 1750, cheese maps were quietly accepted as a Parisian necessity, much like chamber pots and fans shaped like peacocks. And the designs? Hilarious. Early versions barely looked like the city grid. Some used drawings of cheese wheels to represent streets, others marked directions using scent strength, left at the garlic-soaked cellar. If you reach the man with the missing eye, you've gone too far. In one infamous version discovered decades later, a vendor on the left bank was labeled only as that rogue who lies about rinds. But despite the silliness, these maps serve a very real purpose. Paris is sprawling, and cheese moves. Cart routes change. Weather ruins supply. And if your favorite triple cream hasn't been delivered to your arrondissement that week, Well, it might just be worth a 20-minute detour. There's even a kind of honor code. Serious cheese fans never hoard the best finds. They share them, grudgingly, perhaps over wine and slivers of Tommy, updating each other's maps with charcoal pencils or blotchy quill notes. Friendships rise and fall based on the accuracy of one's cheese intel. You take a turn down Rue Montorgueil, a street that will one day be famous for food markets, and even now, it smells incredible: cured meats, crusty bread, a hint of pears. But your focus is the cheese stand run by a toothy man called Marcel, who claims his family has been aging cheese since Charlemagne. Is that true? Who knows? But he makes the best Saint Nectaire this side of the Seine, and it's not on any official map, only a few greasy pocket pages passed between the desperate and the wise. And so, you begin to see how, in a city teeming with carriages, curds, and confusion, a little folded square of paper becomes a survival tool. A badge of honor. A whisper of taste in a world of noise. Because while most travelers hold maps to avoid getting lost, Parisians, they carry them to find cheese. You pause beneath the crumbling awning of a patisserie, tucking the cheese map deeper into your coat. It's damp from your palm sweat and a little smudged where butter from a croissant had its way with the lower corner, but it's still readable. In Paris, 1761, these things are as common as handkerchiefs. Not necessarily because people are obsessed with cartography, but because the cheese scene is overwhelming. The first wave of proper pocket maps, folded with care, sized for a waistcoat, maybe even tied with a little string, emerges just as Paris hits a breaking point. Too many cheese vendors. Too little consistency. And absolutely no regulation. It's culinary anarchy. You aren't looking for a street to visit your aunt. You're looking for that one guy who sells épousses from Dijon, but only if it's rained in the last 24 hours. He's never in the same place twice. So what do? You flip open your cheese map. The earliest versions are barely more than gossip scribbled on parchment. But by the 1760s, they've grown sophisticated. Folded into 12 panels, designed to slide into an inner pocket. Some are etched by professional illustrators moonlighting from their real cartography gigs. Others are drawn by bored students in ink and crusty wine. One even has a waxy thumbprint where someone clearly tested a camembert description against the real thing. Maps might label stands by vendor name, Henri the Sharp, or cheese type, goat, ash rind, guaranteed to whisper your sins. A few include illustrated rating systems, tiny noses to indicate pungency, frowny faces for stalls near chamber pots, and curly arrows for melt trajectory if left in sunlight too long. It's not just tourists who use them. Locals rely on these maps like modern folks rely on food delivery apps. Need a cheese that won't curdle on the walk back to your flat in Montmartre? Check the thermal zones. Want something mellow for breakfast and spicy for dinner? Consult the ripening charts printed on the back. Yes, some cheese maps are double-sided. One popular format is called the 7-day fromage loop. You'd plan an entire week of cheese stops using a spiral-shaped walking path, never hitting the same cart twice, and ending in a back-alley wine cellar near the Bastille. You didn't just survive Paris, you dominated it, one slice at a time. Historians still argue whether these pocket maps were a product of necessity or indulgence. Some say it was simply a way to avoid food poisoning. Others claim it was part of a broader Enlightenment obsession with categorization. But the most fun theory? That it was just snobbery. A cheese arms race. The illusion of control in a city constantly slipping into organized chaos. And it really was chaos. 1 month a stand is famous for its raclette, the next month the cart's owner is arrested for smuggling illicit goat curd from Switzerland. The maps evolve in real time. Margins fill up with handwritten notes. Beware fake Roquefort, too white, smells like cabbage. Or, he moved to Rue des Archives, bribe with figures. There's even a woman named Claudine who sets up shop every Friday outside the old church ruins, selling limited edition cheese maps printed with woodblocks. Her designs are prized for their whimsy: cows riding bicycles, baguettes fencing in alleyways, a wheel of Brie peeking out from behind Notre Dame. Owning a Claudine original earns you status among cheese chasers. People try to copy her style, but the font is never quite right. She's got a little curlicue flourish that nobody can fake. Eventually, more vendors begin making their own pocket maps, often self-serving. Marcel's official cheese guide naturally rates his own cheese 5 stars and casually forgets to mention his rivals. Some maps get so biased, they spark fistfights between rival customers comparing notes at taverns. By now, you've noticed that Parisian fashion adapts too. Tailors begin adding hidden pockets specifically designed to hold cheese maps without creasing them. Some dandy types even wear map holsters sewn into their vests, complete with tiny brass clips. You can't exactly pull out a scroll in the middle of a crowded market, but a swift flick of the wrist and voila, you're the guy who knows where the good Tommy is today. And still, these maps aren't just tools. They're art. A little worn, a little greasy, but lovingly made. Some are perfumed. Others are waterproofed using a thin coating of clarified butter, which is either brilliant or disgusting depending on your tolerance for dairy-based lamination. People begin to collect them, pin them to their walls, hide them in hollowed-out books, trade them for gossip or favors. One tavern owner famously accepts a rare autumn edition map in exchange for a week's worth of ale. Another story tells of a lost map being returned with a note: "Smelled it 3 streets over. Glad it found its way home." There's even a superstition now: if you burn a cheese map, your next 5 wedges will be sour. So you walk, surrounded by people holding folded secrets in their coats, sniffing the air, elbowing toward destiny. Every alley, every cart, every pungent puff of breeze is potentially a clue. The maps may be imperfect. They may lie. But they're better than wandering blind through a minefield of mislabeled Munsters. And as you stand in front of a crooked cart with a fresh wheel of Saint Marcellin perched like a crown jewel, you open your map one more time. Ink smudges. Corners curled. But still, it leads you here. Pocket-sized solutions, in a city too delicious to be predictable. You wake to the echo of clinking bells, cheese cart bells, specifically, and by now, you know exactly what that means. Someone nearby is pushing a wooden wheelbarrow over cobblestones, and it's filled with wedgies, wheels, and waxed bundles of joy. It's 18th century Paris, and cheese isn't waiting for you to come find it anymore, it's coming to you. By the mid-1700s, cheese carts are everywhere. They wind through alleys, cross bridges, and sometimes squeeze straight through open courtyards without asking permission. Every courtier has its regulars. And every regular develops their own cheese routes, kind of like your favorite delivery guy today, except this one might also gossip about your neighbor's romantic escapades while handing you a hunk of reblochen. Some carts are pulled by hand. Others by donkey. A few, ridiculously, by dogs wearing miniature hats. And each one is different. You've got carts that specialize in soft cheeses kept cool with damp cloths, carts for crumbly hard wedges aged under church cellars, and carts that double as rumor mills, newsstands, and informal marriage brokers. Need cheese and a husband? Roll up to the right wheelbarrow. The cart vendors themselves. Icons. Some are young men with sharp tongues and sharper wares. Others are elderly widows who know every grandmother in the arrondissement and won't sell you a slice unless you compliment their cat. Parisians start assigning carts nicknames like the Brie Whisperer, Madame Gruyere, or Le Siffleur, the Whistler, who allegedly calls his cows each morning by flute. One mainstream historical fact often overlooked is that cheese carts weren't just tolerated, they were essential. With no refrigeration and limited transport infrastructure, mobile dairy delivery was the only way to get soft, fresh cheeses into the city before they morphed into science experiments. Cheese shops existed, sure, but they were often out of reach for the working class. Carts filled the gap, roaming, sniffable treasure chests of nourishment and luxury. But of course, all this movement creates a problem. With so many carts in constant motion, how do you keep track of them? That's where things start getting clever and personal. You take out your cheese map and look again. See that dotted line? That's not a street, it's Clement's Wednesday route. You trace it with your finger, down Rue de Turenne, turn at the bakery with the sunflower shutters, pause by the old fountain that leaks blue mineral water, then loop around to Place des Vosges. That's where Clement stops to eat lunch. If he's in a good mood, he'll share a sliver of his prized Brillat Savarin with you. Now imagine dozens of carts like his, each with a different route, schedule, and loyalty circle. It's a moving feast, a parade of milk-based miracles, and the maps evolve accordingly. Some are layered with color-coded trails, others annotated with initials, FA equals Fromage approved. You even see little doodles, tiny cows drawn wearing glasses to signify vendors who read aloud the cheese descriptions for illiterate customers. It becomes a game. Catching a cheese cart is like chasing a comet. If you miss one, you might not see it again for a week. Parisians set out early with folded maps and specific cravings. I need something crumbly but not too funky, preferably aged but soft around the edge, and if it doesn't make me cry when I smell it, I'm not interested. There's a sense of community to it. People swap route intel like trading cards. Rumors fly. Marcel's added smoked chèvre. Genevieve got her hands on that truffle brie from Lyon. And slowly, something wild starts to happen. Neighborhoods begin shaping themselves around these carts. Historians still argue whether cheese cart traffic patterns influenced urban planning, but some evidence suggests that foot traffic for popular vendors led to cleaner paving, better lighting, and even unofficial pedestrian lanes in dense market zones. Cheese wasn't just shaping meals, it was quietly shaping the city. But with fame comes friction. Some neighborhoods guard their carts like royalty. If a beloved vendor even thinks about selling in another district, petitions start flying. There's one documented incident in 1772 where a cart known for its creamy chouse tried crossing into Saint-Germain-des-Prés and was pelted with moldy rinds and shouted back across the Seine. Guilds begin to form, informal at first, then semi-organized. Carts identify with ribbons or wax seals to show affiliation. Green ribbon? That's a Montmartre cart. Blue wax? That's left bank cheddar, don't touch it unless you want your fingers slapped. To protect themselves, some cheesemongers start publishing miniature zones of operation inside their own branded maps. You've seen one, a beautifully etched slice of the city, complete with sunrise and moon symbols to mark morning versus evening deliveries. At the bottom, in delicate script, respect the curved lines. We remember everything. But not all movement is fair. Some wealthy customers hire private cheese runners, teenagers with baskets and excellent lungs, to chase carts and make exclusive purchases. Others bribe vendors to save certain wedges behind the cart, hidden under onions or hay. The maps can't always keep up. They try, but the speed of cheese is faster than ink. That's why no two maps look the same. Everyone updates their own. You scratch out cancelled routes. You add symbols, stars, tears, little explosions to remember which carts made your tongue tingle or your stomach turn. One noblewoman is rumored to have kept a cheese diary bound in goat leather with matching maps tucked in every chapter. And so, you walk on, the bells fading behind you, your fingers dusted with chalk from a wedge you didn't plan to buy but absolutely had to once you smelled it. The city buzzes around you, horses clop, bakeries open, chimneys puff. But all you care about is that you found the cart, followed the map, and made it home with something soft, sharp, and gloriously illegal in 3 provinces. The cheese cart conundrum isn't solved. It's embraced. Paris doesn't resist the madness, it maps it, folds it, and keeps it close to the heart. You sit by a canal with your feet dangling over the murky green water, your cheese map resting beside you like an old friend. You've just finished devouring a slice of something that may or may not have been aged in a violin case, according to the cart vendor, anyway. Your lips tingle, your nose is slightly confused, and your soul is completely satisfied. That was no accident. You, and thousands like you, are now part of an entire subculture that's exploding across 18th century Paris, the cheese chasers. See, somewhere along the line, it stopped being just about food. It became a game, a challenge, a badge of pride. The cheese chaser is not just a glutton with a goat fetish. They are adventurers, seekers of the rare, the aged, the slightly illegal. They carry maps annotated with symbols only they understand. They have code words, rituals, even a loose sense of fashion, waistcoats with wide inner pockets, boots for long treks, and a satchel lined with waxed linen just in case they score something really runny. These people roam Paris like caffeinated squirrels, sniffing the breeze for dairy on the move. Some rise before dawn to catch the secret carts that only appear at sunrise behind abandoned stables. Others stay out late, attending underground cheese salons where wedges are swapped, reviewed, and paired with poetry and scandal. Mainstream history tends to focus on the salons of Voltaire and Rousseau, but there's compelling evidence that underground cheese salons were thriving at the same time. Quiet gatherings lit by candlelight, where artists, students, and even nobles shared rounds of liverot wrapped in fresh grape leaves, speaking in low tones about terroir and politics. A particularly eccentric group called Les Suiveurs du Lait, the followers of the milk, kept a logbook, half tasting notes, half gossip rag. It was discovered decades later in a boarded-up wine cellar. Inside were entries like, June 12th, Camille fainted after a triple cream incident. Revived with pickled shallots. July 3rd, Maurice spotted chasing the Brie comet through the Marais barefoot. Wore no pants. Historians still argue whether cheese chasing began as a necessity or a hobby that spiraled into obsession. Was it really about nourishment, or was it about mastering something wildly unmasterable in a chaotic, overripe city? Maybe both. Paris is delicious and overwhelming, and chasing cheese gives people a sense of purpose even if it ends in gastrointestinal betrayal. You see these chasers everywhere. That man jogging past you with the lopsided hat. He's not exercising, he's following a cheese map update from a boy he bribed with sugared almonds. The woman with ink-stained gloves and crumbs on her lap. She just finished logging today's taste test notes before the pigeons arrive. A standard chaser toolkit includes a folding cheese map, often triple-noted and wine-stained, a pocket knife with an extra-wide blade, a leather pouch of fennel seeds, for clearing the palate, chalk, for marking walls or cobblestones with cheese cart sightings, and occasionally, a disguise. Some vendors only sell to regulars. There are even beginner-friendly pamphlets being sold now at bookstores along the Seine, A Young Lady's Guide to Dairy Delights, or From Stall to Stomach, A Gentleman's Cheese Quest. These books come with sample route maps and emergency etiquette tips like don't sniff the cheese before greeting the vendor or never argue about rind with someone over 60. You flip your map open again, and there it is, a symbol someone penciled in just this morning. A wedge with a tiny crown drawn over it. It means new royalty spotted a cart selling something so good, it's earned a temporary throne in the unspoken cheese hierarchy. You decide to chase it. Along the way, you cross paths with fellow hunters. Some nod. Some whisper warnings. One tries to bribe you for your intel. And then, out of the foggy distance near Rue des Rosiers, you see it, a low wooden cart, its cloth canopy flapping, its bell barely audible over the clatter of hooves. The vendor, a stooped man in a hat made of leaves, is setting down a wedge on a chipped porcelain plate. You join the small crowd. A young couple. An old woman with a goat on a leash. The vendor says nothing. He simply slices a sliver, hands it over. It's creamy, smoky, and sharp. You close your eyes and chew slowly. Around you, nobody speaks. It's a moment of collective reverence. Then, chaos resumes. People scribble on their maps. The goat eats part of someone's cloak. The vendor packs up and disappears down the alley without another word. You mark your map. You add a star. You whisper the name to yourself so you won't forget it. L'Aube Noire, the Black Dawn. Probably just a nickname, or a figment of someone's over-fermented imagination. But to you, it's real. Cheese chasing is never just about cheese. It's about chasing something elusive. A perfect moment. A forgotten flavor. A scent you'll recognize forever once you've found it once. And even if it's not always glamorous, sometimes it means dirty boots, melted pouches, and a few bruises from shoving matches over the last slice. It's yours. It's Paris. It's now. Because this city, in all its creamy, crusty, unpredictable brilliance, doesn't hand you pleasure on a silver platter. It makes you work for it. Map it. Chase it. Earn it. And if you're lucky, you'll be the first to find what everyone else is still sniffing for. Your fingers are ink-stained, your satchel smells faintly of grass-fed camembert, and your breath? Well, let's just say you're not making any new friends until you chew a clove or two. But you don't care. Today you're chasing a rumor, the phantom cheese cart. Every chaser eventually hears about it. A cart with no fixed route. No regular vendor. It appears at twilight, sells only 3 wedges, and disappears before anyone can ask its name. People claim it has wheels made of barrel staves, a canopy of burgundy silk, and a silver bell that sounds like chimes in water. You think it's nonsense. Urban legend. Or at least you did until 3 separate people marked the same cart on 3 separate maps, all at different times, all in the exact same alley. You fold your map, lace your boots, and head toward the shadowed corridor between a shuttered wine shop and a crumbling synagogue. Paris in twilight is a city sliding into dream. The shutters groan closed. Lamps flicker. Horse hooves soften on cobbles damp with mist. And in this hushed world, you creep through a back street with your map open to the margin where someone scribbled, Phantom Rue du Sepulchre, 6:41 p.m. You're early. Good. You crouch behind a stack of crates that smell like dried mint and mystery. You listen. Wait. No cart. No bell. Just a tomcat sauntering by like it owns the quartier. But then, something shifts. A breeze. A whisper. No, a sound. Soft wheels. Deliberate. Slow. You peer around the crates and see it. The cart is real. At least, it looks real. Weathered oak sides. A velvet cloth covering cheeses that shimmer faintly in the lamplight. No vendor, just a small sign hanging off the side. Choose one. Leave one. Speak none. Your heart skips. You step forward, and your feet barely make a sound. You reach into the cloth and pull out a wedge wrapped in lavender parchment. It's cold, dense, and smells faintly of hay and citrus. And beneath it, a space, just big enough for the cheese you brought earlier, a sharp, crumbly wheellet from a Basque grandmother with a wicked sense of humor. You trade. You step back. The bell tinkles once. Then the cart creaks away, vanishing into fog without a trace. This moment will never appear on your official cheese map. But you mark it anyway, right there in the margin with a single dot and a tiny crescent moon. That's the secret language of the chasers, map the unmappable. Mainstream historians often ignore this part of cheese culture, dismiss it as superstition or urban folklore. But there's a growing school of thought that phantom carts, underground trades, and anonymous vendors actually served a political function. During periods of censorship or famine, Food swapping in plain sight became a code. Cheese was never just cheese, it was survival. Rebellion. Even espionage. Historians still argue whether the phantom cart was a rotating network of rebels or a single, legendary figure. One theory posits that it was the disguise of a noblewoman in exile, distributing secret notes inside cheese rinds. Another insists it was nothing more than a bored cheesemonger with a flair for drama. You don't care. You tasted the cheese. It was real. And it's not the only secret cart in town. There's La Souterraine, a cart that operates only through cellars and tunnels, mostly in the Marais. You have to enter through a broken wine hatch, crawl past 3 barrels of bad cider, and whisper a code word, usually something absurd like pigeon flan. There's La Double, a mirrored cart run by identical twins who never speak but sell 2 copies of every cheese and always ask you to give one away within the hour. And then there's L'Errant, the wandering one. No route, no origin, no fixed design. It's said to appear only to those who truly need it. You scoff at that idea, until one rainy morning when your coin purse is empty, your boots are falling apart, and you have a terrible head cold from standing in the Seine for a dare. You mutter to yourself, I'd kill for some épousses right now, and 3 streets later, it appears. You swear it winked at you. Paris, it turns out, is full of maps, but most of them are useless unless you believe. Belief becomes the operating system of the cheese cart world. You believe that certain wedges cure heartbreak. You believe that mold shapes predict the weather. You believe that if you chew Comte under a full moon while listening to opera, your taste buds will unlock something ancient. And maybe they do. Because this isn't just food. It's folklore. It's fuel. It's something that belongs to the city and to you if you're paying attention. So you redraw your map again. Add symbols. Curves. A star near the cemetery where the silent nun hands out ash-aged Chèvre on Thursdays. A ghost near the alley where the phantom cart appeared. A drop of honey for that place near the Seine where you tasted your first real Roquefort and cried a little, not because it was strong, but because it made you feel like someone finally understood your tongue. The map isn't beautiful. It's smudged. Torn. Some parts are impossible to read. But it's yours. And it changes with every footstep, every hunch, every cheese you dare to chase. So next time someone tells you that a cart only exists at twilight, or that a nun gives cheese away to people who confess their secrets, or that a wedge once sang when bitten into "Don't roll your eyes," just add it to the map. Fold it. Tuck it into your coat. And go see for yourself. There's a rhythm to your days now. Wake, stretch, sip something vaguely caffeinated, unfold your cheese map, and ask yourself the single most sacred question in your universe. Where is the dairy pulling me today? This morning, the map points you south, into a district marked with odd annotations. There's a tiny pig drawn next to a wedge. A squiggly line with flames above it. And a word written in someone else's hand, smelt down. You head that way. The Faubourg Saint-Marcel isn't glamorous. It smells of coal soot and cabbage water. But it's where the boldest cheeses dwell. This is fermented frontier territory, home to the city's stinkiest, most structurally unsound wedges. One stall in particular has become infamous for hosting what locals call the daily smeltdown. At precisely noon, this aging board begins to give off such pungent, onion foot energy that passers-by start to veer instinctively toward the opposite wall. Children cry. Dogs flee. Street performers go momentarily mute. And you're walking straight into it. A man with a red scarf and no eyebrows, burned off by a regrettable encounter with a sulfuric Stilton, guards the stall. He sees your map. He nods. You know what this is, he says, gesturing to the quivering block at the center of the table. It's been banned twice and blessed once. The cheese in question is a violent shade of ochre, melting at the corners into a slow, viscous ooze. Its name, according to a tiny brass sign, is Le Cri de Minute, the midnight scream. A washed-rind monster born from a cow fed entirely on fermented beets and night thistles. You take a bite, and you are not the same. It tastes like a broken promise and a full moon. Like a brass instrument left in a swamp. Like being chased by something you secretly want to catch you. You cough. You wipe your eyes. You smile. It's magnificent. This is what the connoisseurs call funk chasing, a subculture of cheese fanatics who believe that the truest expression of terroir is chaos. They seek the ones that walk the line between divine and dangerous. The ones that make you question your taste in everything, including yourself. They argue over which strain of bacteria gives the best burn. They hold midnight tasting parties on rooftops with blindfolds and earplugs, because removing the senses sharpens the spirit. They exchange ferment codes in alleyways like urchins trading black market saffron. Mainstream historians have only recently begun acknowledging funk chasing. For decades, it was dismissed as vulgar. But today, scholars are digging up diaries and underground menus that show these cheeses weren't just tolerated, they were celebrated by radicals and artists. One famed composer, rumored to have created entire symphonies under the influence of funk cheese, once wrote, "It sings first in the nose, then the tongue, then the soul. I do not write, I rot melodically." Historians still argue whether these composers and thinkers were driven by flavor or by fermentation-induced hallucination. But either way, their cheese-fueled output changed the city. And now, you're part of that tradition. You carry a wedge wrapped in wax paper that smells like a thunderstorm. People avoid you on the street. A rat gives you a knowing nod. You head toward a nearby bridge, where a funk chaser meetup is rumored to occur every Thursday. You arrive to find 5 people wearing gloves and tiny gold nose clips. One hands you a stick of ginger and a linen square. "To help with reentry," she says solemnly. They set out their offerings like monks at Vespers. One presents a slate-hued blob known only as the fog. Another offers something that looks like it might be breathing. You contribute your midnight scream, and the group bows. The tasting begins. No one speaks. There are tears. There are flashbacks. One man briefly believes his inside a barrel of honey. It is beautiful. The group journals silently. You do, too. On the back of your map, you write, "Smeltdown achieved. Divine. I saw my own childhood. And a turnip." But funk chasing isn't just about weirdness. It's about vulnerability. These cheeses are loud, unfiltered, unpredictable, just like people. And loving them is an act of acceptance. Of saying, yes, you're a bit much. But so am I. Later that evening, you find yourself walking past a church where a nun tends a tiny cart. No signs. No pitch. Just a half-wheel sitting under a cloche. She catches your eye, then lifts the cover. The scent is immediate. Wet wool. Mulch. A distant hint of summer rain on limestone. You don't ask questions. You pay, she nods, and you walk away with what feels less like a purchase and more like a secret. As you cross the bridge home, the bells toll softly and the city glows with candlelight behind lace curtains. Your satchel is warm against your hip. You feel a little dizzy, a little transcendent. Paris, you think, is not just a city. It's an aging chamber. A place that invites you to ferment alongside everything else. To grow stranger, richer, more intense. And tomorrow, you'll map something new. By now, your map is no longer a map. It's a relic. A living diary. A patchwork of sweat-smudged ink, grease spots, and crusty corners that still faintly reek of Pont l'Evêque. You've begun annotating with symbols only you understand, little spirals for spiritual experiences, upside-down triangles for cheeses that made you question your identity. There's even one marked with an exclamation point and a lightning bolt. That one? Let's not talk about that one. Not yet. You're learning that in 18th century Paris, cheese didn't just exist, it moved. It migrated. It changed shape depending on weather, politics, even gossip. And no one navigated this better than the cheese runners. You first hear the term whispered over coffee by a man with boots too clean for the market district. He notices your map, raises a brow, and leans in. You know the route to Rue des Trois Frères, he asks. You nod slowly. Ever follow the girl with the green scarf, he adds. The one with the wheel strapped to her back. You haven't. You should. And like that, you're hooked. You spot her 2 days later, weaving through the alleys with the confidence of someone who's never taken a wrong turn. The scarf is Chartreuse. The cheese is a full wheel of something crumbly and pale, maybe a Tommy. She carries it like a backpack, cinched with string and linen. You follow. She ducks through tunnels, vaults a fence, greets a dog with a hand signal, and, without ever looking back, leads you into a courtyard you didn't know existed. There, 7 other runners gather. Some with cheese slings. One with a hollowed-out loaf concealing an oozing center. Another pulling a wagon that smells like goat ambition and forest mushrooms. You're invisible in the shadows, heart racing. They exchange. Not money, wheels. Entire cheeses. Hand-to-hand swaps, no words spoken. Then they vanish, like mist slipping through a grate. That night, you update your map with a new icon, a tiny running figure holding a wheel. Later, through a brie-loving friend in the Montparnasse art scene, you learn that these runners form a kind of cheese smuggling guild, a loose network of culinary nomads. They carry cheeses between city districts that ban certain rinds or tax specific milk types. They dodge inspectors, bribe toll boys, and sometimes disguise their deliveries inside sculpture molds or baby prams. Mainstream historians often overlook these runners. Too scrappy. Too undocumented. But new research is beginning to uncover journals and coded correspondence that suggest these weren't just cheese smugglers, they were cultural couriers. They kept rare, regionally specific recipes alive by transporting them across borders of class, language, and legality. One famous account mentions a runner named Lisette du Marais, who once transported a molten Mont d'Or from the Jura Mountains all the way to Paris without it cooling once. She reportedly wrapped it in heated stones, tucked it inside a basket of feathers, and hid it under her skirts. When she arrived, it was still steaming, and promptly served to a gathering of writers who swore it inspired an entire political pamphlet. Historians still argue whether Lisette was a real person or a composite of many runners, but the legend sticks. And you start to see little nods to her everywhere, a doodle on a cellar wall, a scarf tied a certain way, a phrase whispered in market stalls, Lisette's will turn still. You don't become a runner yourself. Not yet. But you start training. You practice carrying cheese in odd shapes, wedges wrapped tight against your ribcage, rind-strapped rounds in the crook of your knee. You time yourself moving from Rue du Bac to Rue Mouffetard with a stinking reblochon tucked into your coat. You beat your record. Then you do it again, carrying a blue so intense it sings in your pockets. At night, you dream of routes, hidden ladders, forgotten tunnels, a map of Paris overlaid with cheese trails, glowing softly in the dark like veins. One evening, as you sit on the steps near the Pantheon, eating an anonymous square of something sharp and lemony, gifted to you by a silent boy in a baker's apron, a woman approaches. She looks at your map. She nods. Then she pulls something from her bag, a rolled parchment. Older. More ornate. It's drawn on vellum. Stained with butter. You recognize the handwriting. It's the same as the marginalia near your phantom cart entry. She holds it out. Wanna trade, she says. You hesitate. Then, of course you do. And as the new map unrolls in your hands, you see it's not a cheese map at all. Or rather, it is. But more. It shows movement. Arrows, pulsing loops, stars that shift depending on season. There's a section labeled the Mold Cathedral. Another reads, Caves of Ash. And in the lower corner, a phrase written in gold leaf. The city ages. So must we. You're not sure what that means yet. But you're ready to find out. You sleep with the vellum map tucked under your pillow, because of course you do. And when you wake, something's different. Not the city, Paris still wheezes and clatters and sings like always, but you. You've crossed into new territory. No longer a mere enthusiast, you're a pilgrim. You don't just chase cheese now. You let it call you. The new map is cryptic. Symbols replace street names. The Seine is labeled the flow between ferment. Montmartre is sketched like a wedge cut from a massive wheel. And scattered throughout are tiny cathedral icons, each one with a halo of mold patterns surrounding the spire. These aren't churches. Not really. They're aging chambers, deep cellars scattered through the city where the real magic happens. You set off, wrapped in wool, paper tucked into your coat, searching for the first of them, La Crypt Blue. It's hidden beneath an abandoned wine shop in the 11th arrondissement. You find the door behind a dusty curtain, guarded by a man who looks like he's been breathing spores since birth. He examines your map. He gestures you through. Inside, the air changes instantly, cooler, denser. Every breath tastes like stone and salt and time. The corridor narrows until you're ducking, then crawling, then open space. You emerge into a vault lit by beeswax candles and faint blue phosphorescence. Wheels and blocks and bricks of cheese rest on wooden shelves, wrapped in linen, turned regularly by a silent procession of caretakers. Here, cheeses aren't sold. They're cultivated like relics. Each one has a name, a date, and sometimes a whispered backstory. One has survived 3 revolutions. Another is said to have been blessed by a monk who spoke only in puns. You're handed a morsel of something creamy, blue-veined, and slightly fizzy on the tongue. It tastes like anxiety and rain. Like finding a poem you forgot you wrote. You nearly cry. And that's when you understand, this isn't food. It's a belief system. Aging chambers like these aren't just about storage. They're about patience. Control. Humility. The cheese doesn't care what you want. It ripens when it pleases. It grows molds you didn't predict. And if it chooses to collapse or crack or bloom unexpectedly, well, that's just the doctrine of the rind. Historians have long debated the cultural role of these underground spaces. Some argue they were merely practical, cold, dark, and affordable. Others see them as devotional, nearly monastic zones where cheesemakers practiced a kind of quiet artistry. Still others believe the chambers played a secret political role. Notes passed beneath wax seals. Messages hidden inside hollowed cheese rinds. After all, who searches a wheel of triple creme for treason? You leave La Crypt Blue altered. Something in your brain rewires. The world above feels louder now. Brighter. And you want nothing more than to go deeper. So you begin chamber hunting. Your map lists 5 more, each stranger than the last. You visit El Escalier Tournant, an underground spiral staircase where goat cheeses are aged 1 step per week. By the time a wheel reaches the bottom, it's been through 72 microclimates, each step a lesson in texture. You're allowed to lick the lowest one. It tastes like frost and pine and the faintest hint of regret. Next comes La Cathédrale des Croûtes, a vaulted salt cave lined entirely with aged rinds pressed into mosaic. People come here just to sit and breathe. It's said that 18th century poets would meditate here before writing anything about heartbreak. You try it. You write a haiku about melted brie and emotional codependence. It is haunting. There's even a rumored chamber on a raft, a floating cellar tethered secretly under a bridge. No one knows who tends it. But sometimes, just before dawn, the wind carries a soft smell of Gruyère down the river. You begin to think of yourself as a kind of cheese monk, a pilgrim of the paste, chanting quietly about moisture ratios and airflow. You meet others like you. People who've given up wine, meat, even sugar, just to better taste the subtleties of ash-rubbed Chèvre. At one chamber, you're shown a miracle cheese. It's aged for 10 years in complete silence. No talking near it. No music. Just stillness. They say when it's finally served, you can hear your own childhood laugh again. You don't laugh. You nod. You understand. And through it all, the map changes. You update it constantly, new lines, revised times, dots where no dots were before. It no longer matches the physical streets. It's become a map of flavor memory, of scent trails and emotional residue. But one symbol keeps appearing again and again. A small black spiral, always just out of reach. The key in the margin simply reads, Le Coeur Fongique. The fungal heart. No address. No direction. Just the suggestion that somewhere, beneath this city, lies a place where all the molds converge. A chamber so powerful it can ripen anything, even you. You circle it. You dream about it. And soon, you'll go looking. You spend the next 2 weeks obsessing over the spiral symbol. Le Coeur Fongique, the fungal heart. It appears subtly, tucked into corners of your vellum map like a cartographer's guilty conscience. Sometimes it's drawn in thick black ink. Other times, it's a smudge, a ghost of a spiral penciled over rooftops or stitched into the margins beside mold samples. You start connecting the dots, literally. You overlay your old pocket map, your annotations, your market routes, the runners' paths, and the locations of the 6 known aging chambers. When you pin them all on your wall and step back, something shifts. The pattern begins to breathe. It's not a location. It's a rhythm. Every chamber, every cheese, every whispered name has pulsed toward this one silent, secret center, and now, so do you. But here's the problem, no one will talk about it. Not your contact at the Rue Claire tasting cellar. Not the man with the hollow loaf. Not even the woman with the chartreuse scarf, who now nods at you in mutual acknowledgement, a faint mark of solidarity etched in rind-shaped understanding. Not ready, she says once, and that's all. Still, you press on. You start in the libraries. Not the royal ones, you're not chasing Voltaire's Brie quotes, you're after cheese marginalia. Notes scribbled in cookbooks, cellar logs, and mislabeled geography tomes. You find one 1762 journal of a monastery that refers to the great bloom beneath the navel of the city. Sounds like the fungal heart to you. You spend a night in the catacombs, not the tourist route, but the true, claustrophobic veins. At one intersection you find a single word scratched into the limestone in brown chalk, affinage. The aging process. You sit. You listen. You swear you hear something fermenting in the distance. Like milk whispering through stone. And that's when you begin to understand, the fungal heart isn't marked on a map because it's not a place. Not exactly. It's a convergence. A moment. A kind of ripeness in space-time. Historians are divided, naturally. Some believe Le Coeur Fongique was a literal megachamber beneath the Isle de la site, collapsed or sealed off centuries ago after the blue explosion of 1738. Don't worry, we'll get to that. Others say it was a metaphor, a symbol of total flavor harmony sought by the most devout affineurs, a perfection only whispered about over rind-dusted tables. And then there are those who insist it still exists. Hidden. Guarded. Accessible only when the season, the moon, and your gut flora are just right. You become obsessed with balance. You begin fasting not from food, but from anything that dulls your palate. No pickled onions. No clove cigarettes. No romantic disappointment. You cleanse with raw milk and mint leaves. You sleep on straw. You spend a full day trying to sense the presence of mold in the air by holding your breath in alleys and licking limestone walls. You will not repeat that day. Finally, you make contact. A woman with no shoes, a crate of wheels strapped to her back, and a walking stick carved to look like a wedge of Saint Nectaire appears beside you in line at a fermentation workshop near Bastille. She says nothing, but passes you a folded paper napkin. On it, a time, a place, and the faint outline of a spiral. It leads you to a bakery that hasn't sold bread in a decade. Down a staircase so steep you have to slide, past barrels, wire racks, and finally to a single door. Above it, etched in ancient mold patterns, is the spiral. You knock once, twice, then a third, slower time instinctively. It opens. Inside, it's silent. Lit only by glass jars of fireflies and walls lined with cheeses so aged they look fossilized. One looks like it predates dairy. Another hums. Like, literally emits a soft harmonic tone. A man waits for you, old as a rind, face creased like bark. He speaks slowly, carefully, in a voice like warm brie falling off a spoon. You've fermented long enough, he says. And then, he lifts a cloth from the table. Beneath it is a single cheese. Not round. Not square. A spiral. A perfect echo of the map. You do not eat this one, he says. You nod. Of course not. You inhale. And so you do. You lean close. The aroma hits instantly, a combination of everything you've tasted since this journey began. Soft mold. Acid. Earth. Sweetness. Grass. Loss. Memory. All of it. It fills your lungs. Your mind quiets. Your fingers tingle. And just for a moment, the world becomes still. The map, your journey, the runners, the markets, the chambers, the whispered legends, they're all part of one organism. One living culture. And you are now part of it. You leave the chamber changed. No one says goodbye. You don't need it. And the next morning, when you unfold your pocket map, there's something new. The spiral is gone. But in its place is a softly glowing circle. Like something has finished ripening. You wake to an unfamiliar quiet. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of need. Your map lies open beside you, and that glowing circle, still faint, still unlabeled, feels less like a destination and more like an arrival. You no longer race across arrondissements, breathless and starving. You no longer quiz vendors about curd temperatures or trace ancient drainage lines hoping for fungal clues. That wild, delicious desperation that gripped you in the early days. It's fermented into something steadier now. Acceptance. Respect. A kind of inner cheese monk peace. But Paris doesn't stand still just because you've had a spiritual epiphany in a moldy basement. In fact, something's changing again. You start to notice small symbols cropping up around the city, etched into lampposts, folded into cafe napkins, chalked onto cobblestones before the rain hits. A swirl here. A dotted circle there. Someone is mapping again. But not the same way you did. This feels newer. Younger. You follow one of these marks down an alley in the 3rd arrondissement and find a folding table covered in miniature cheeses, tiny works of edible sculpture. Some shaped like keys, others like flowers. One is unmistakably shaped like the Eiffel Tower, though that's still 60 years from being built. Behind the table stands a teenager, maybe 15, eyes sharp, sleeves dusted with flour and curd. She doesn't flinch when you approach. In fact, she smiles like she's been expecting you. You're one of them, she says. The spiral followers. You blink. That term, spiral followers, you've never heard it spoken aloud. You ask what she means. She shrugs. It's just what we call you. The ones who came before. Before what? She doesn't answer. But she offers you one of the tiny cheeses. It's bright yellow, studded with green peppercorns, and smells like lemon zest and hay. You take a bite. It tastes hopeful. You realize she's not copying the old maps. She's starting a new one. One mapped by flavor, not location. A dynamic, living guide that changes with the cheese itself. Where do you get your milk? You ask. She grins. A donkey that only eats time. Of course. And suddenly it hits you. The next generation is already here. The cheese runners, the cellar dwellers, the mold whisperers, they were all you. But someone has to follow them, too. The journey is circular, ever turning, like a wheel maturing in the dark. And the maps? They're less about directions now, and more about legacy. You weren't just following a cheese map, you became part of it. Every step you took, every rind you savored, added layers to something bigger than one person. Historians have wrestled with this idea for centuries. Was the explosion of cheese mapping in 18th century Paris a spontaneous cultural phenomenon? A collective obsession born from scarcity and sensory craving? Or was it, intentionally or not, a form of underground resistance? Because here's a fringe theory: the maps weren't just about cheese. They were about freedom. A way to move unseen. To connect. To resist the sameness imposed by a city tightening under royal pressure and fiscal paranoia. Think about it. No official would suspect that a tiny map tucked inside a woman's glove was a tool of subversion. No one would interrogate a dairy boy who delivered aged brine samples. It was all part of the flavor and part of the camouflage. Even the cheesemongers knew this. A few left behind notes that have survived, scribbled on labels or between the lines of ledgers. We do not sell. We share what resists time. Let the taste be the truth. If the king asks, it's only camembert. These weren't just gourmets. They were mapmakers of meaning. Back in your apartment, you unroll your old vellum and begin to annotate again, not with places, but with memories. That first crumble of Tommy in the rain. The way your hands shook before entering La Crypt Blue. The moment that spiral vanished. You write the word ripened next to your old roots. Not finished. Not completed. Ripened. A mark of maturity. Change. Edibility. And yet, even now, the circle pulses faintly in your mind. Just when you think the journey's over, it turns again. So you rise. Pull on your scarf. Fold your map. And set off, not to chase, but to listen. To the whispers between stalls. To the hush beneath cobblestones. To the cheese that's yet to be found. The circle glows a little softer each day, like it's resting. You take the hint. Now your adventures move slower. Less sprinting, more lingering. You begin to notice the things you'd overlooked before, the exact way the butter crusts on the morning brioche, how the Seine smells faintly sour on warm afternoons like overripe fruit. You're not chasing maps anymore. You're tracing patterns, flavors, moments. That's when you hear it again, blue explosion. It's a term that had floated past you weeks ago, once muttered in the back of a tasting salon, once whispered during a mold lecture in Montmartre, always followed by nervous glances and tight lips. The blue explosion of 1738. You finally find someone willing to speak about it, though only under strict anonymity and inside a former wine cellar now repurposed into a cheese listening chamber. That's exactly what it sounds like, a vaulted space where people sit in silence and attune themselves to the subtle hisses and sighs of ripening cheeses. Think meditation meets mildew. The story goes like this. In the spring of 1738, a catastrophic fermentation event occurred in the underground affinage vaults of St. Roch. Someone had been aging Roquefort in unapproved limestone chambers lined with foreign moss. The result? A runaway bloom. The mold not only multiplied, it amplified. Overnight, 22 wheels of Roquefort underwent spontaneous over-fermentation, swelling beyond containment and ultimately bursting. The blast coated an entire block in cerulean spores. A baker went temporarily blind. 3 dogs developed enhanced taste sensitivity. One unlucky gendarme, stationed nearby, reported hearing the cheeses speak in Latin. He retired immediately and became a glassblower in Marseille. To this day, historians can't agree on the cause. Some claim it was a temperature miscalculation. Others suspect sabotage, a war of rival affineurs, fighting for dominance through weaponized penicillium. The most fringe theory? That the explosion wasn't a failure, but an attempt to open the fungal heart by force. Whatever the truth, the event triggered a wave of paranoia in Paris. The Crown, already suspicious of cheese commerce due to its untaxed nature and cloaked mobility, imposed harsh restrictions. Cheese sellers had to be licensed. Mold strains had to be registered. And pocket maps banned. Cartography raids became a real thing. Runners were stopped in the street, pockets turned inside out. Even innocent doodles shaped like spirals were treated as contraband. One student was briefly imprisoned for sketching a cinnamon roll in the margin of a physics notebook. You feel a chill. Because the maps, once whimsical, once delicious, were now evidence. Of rebellion. Of belief. Still, the runners adapted. Mapmakers grew more clever. Spiral codes became embroidery patterns. Cheese roots were hidden in musical notation or the folds of origami dairy cows. One group started tattooing maps onto their backs in edible ink and hosting tasting salons that doubled as decoding parties. And here's the wildest part: the maps got better. That's the thing about pressure, it can crush, sure, but it can also refine. Like milk under strain becomes cheese, the movement became stronger in its secrecy. You find yourself holding a tattered handkerchief one night, gifted by an old cheesemonger with a wink. To the untrained eye, it's just polka dots. But something about the spacing, you squint, count, compare. Suddenly, it's obvious it's a time-stamped route across the 11th arrondissement, plotted in Stilton-to-Goat transitions. You follow it the next morning and discover a courtyard filled with suspended cloth bags, dripping soft white curds into ancient wooden pails. A woman stirs each bag with a copper spoon, humming a melody that matches the same rhythm as the polka dots. She says nothing, just hands you a spoon. The cheese is warm, faintly fizzy, like yogurt caught in a dream. You taste it and feel seen. That night, you return home and pull out your oldest map. You begin adding a new layer, not with ink, but with thread. Tiny colored stitches between nodes. Not to preserve the past, but to mirror what's still alive. Because this isn't history. It's fermentation. And fermentation doesn't end. It evolves. You've stopped using ink entirely now. Everything goes down in thread, soft, looping, careful stitches on linen, scarves, even the inside lining of your coat. There's something about the tactility that feels right. Ink fades. Paper crumbles. But thread clings. Thread remembers. And still, the city hums with its quiet, oozing secrets. One afternoon, as you sip a broth steeped with cheese rinds at a stall under the Pont Marie, you overhear a name, La Caisse du Lait Perdu, the box of lost milk. You freeze. The man saying it, slender, grey cloak, chipped tooth, catches your look and raises an eyebrow. Then, with great solemnity, he drops a soft wedge of something crumbly and lavender-tinted into your hand and vanishes into the fog rolling off the Seine. The cheese is fine, slightly floral. But that name, it haunts you. You ask around. Most people shrug. A few snicker. But one woman, a map-sleeved violinist who plays near Les Halles, nods very slowly. They say it floats, she whispers. That's all. So, naturally, You begin looking up. Not metaphorically. You start climbing. Roofs. Attics. Belfries. Anywhere the smell of curd can cling. You notice pigeons behaving strangely, congregating near certain chimneys, circling above forgotten clock towers. One night, under a waxing moon, you follow a line of cheese rinds someone has quietly wedged between rooftop shingles. They form a perfect spiral. At its center, a wooden crate. Small. Nailed shut. Covered in wax seals and faint, fungal scoring. It's perched at the edge of a sloped roof, so precarious it shouldn't even stay balanced. But it does. You don't open it, not yet. You take it home. Let it sit. It feels important to wait. And as it rests, you start hearing rumors of similar crates appearing across the city. Some filled with half-melted wheels. Others empty but fragrant. One was said to hum, like the chamber from the fungal heart. There's no consensus on their meaning. Historians remain divided, as always. Some claim they were spiritual offerings, cheese votives left to honor the fungal deities of urban decay. Others argue they were decentralized cheese libraries, left by rogue affineurs during the post-explosion crackdowns. And one particularly eccentric theory suggests they were parcels of memory, containers for milk that had forgotten its origins, given new purpose by those who could read the mold. You finally open your crate on the 12th night. Inside, a folded cloth map, woven entirely from strands of pale curd-dyed wool. No words. No roads. Just gentle swirls, layered over each other in thread-thin arcs. It doesn't show where to go. It shows where you've been. It mirrors your own stitched coat lining almost exactly, except for one final swirl at the top corner. A place you've never been. An arrondissement known for nothing more than wallpaper factories and mediocre apples. Naturally, you go. You walk the perimeter for hours. Nothing. Until you smell it, a faint buttered toast warmth, followed by something blue. You follow it down a narrow street, past a fabric shop, around a stone gate, and suddenly, you're there. Not a chamber. Not a cellar. But a garden. Lush. Hidden. Wild with moss and soft-leaved herbs. Faint puffs of white mold drift like pollen. And at its center, on a bench carved from cheese crates, sits a young boy slowly pressing curd into a wooden mold shaped like a crescent moon. He doesn't look up. Just nods. And next to him, another box. Smaller than yours. Labeled 2 of 9. You sit beside him. He hands you a wedge, crumbly, sharp, with a lemony bloom. And for a long while, you say nothing. Just listen. Because the story isn't done. There are still boxes to find. Threads to stitch. Cheeses to press. And maps, always maps. Your dreams become more textured. Not metaphorically, literally. You feel your way through them by rind and bloom, through wax and whey. You wake up chewing phantom curds. Something's shifted. You begin to notice how your own senses have sharpened. You can now identify the age of a cheese just by the way it exhales when sliced. You once correctly guessed a Tommy's humidity curve based on how its shadow leaned against a tile wall. People don't talk to you anymore, they consult you. And still the boxes appear. Box 3 of 9 turned up tucked inside a street organ in Belleville. Box 4 was buried beneath a stack of expired wine barrels behind a failing jazz cafe. Box 5 appeared in the hands of a mime who performed a scene of being trapped in a cave made of cheese rinds, only breaking character to whisper, "The path is curled, not straight," before vanishing into a rainstorm. You don't find the boxes. They find you. Each one contains something a little different. Some maps, yes, but also other clues. Tiny bell molds, a wedge that tastes unmistakably of grief, an empty jar with the word breathe etched inside the glass. Whatever the contents, You add them to your archive, a growing collection that now sprawls across your kitchen floor and half the stairwell. But here's the thing, the city is changing, too. The old cheese network is no longer just a secret society. It's becoming something larger. Public, even. Quiet tasting circles morph into pop-up markets. There's a stall at the edge of the Marche des Enfants Rouges that offers experimental dairy pilgrimages. The phrase makes you laugh and then cry a little. One night, you hear the spiral again. Not see it. Hear it. A series of notes drifting from an accordion on Rue Saint-Denis, curling just so. You follow it like a bloodhound until you reach a stairwell that seems older than the city around it. You descend. And descend. The air changes. Cooler. Wetter. You pass through 7 arches. Each one bears a strange symbol in wax. Finally, at the bottom, you find a vault, round, stone, sealed by a door shaped exactly like a wheel of pressed ash-coated Valenquais. It swings open. Inside, a tasting room with no food. Just chairs. And silence. But one by one, people begin to arrive. Familiar faces. The young girl with the time-fed donkey. The violinist. The mime. Even the street organ, now wheeled in and softly spinning. You sit. No one speaks. But slowly, everyone reaches into their coats, their boots, their scarves, and pulls out thread. Some long, some short. Different colors. Some still faintly smelling of mold. One woman stands and begins weaving. Onto a loom no one remembers bringing. Others follow. You join them. Historians still debate what this moment meant. Was it the founding of the Guild of Spiral Artisans? The symbolic end of the blue explosion's lingering trauma? Or perhaps it marked the shift from cheese as food to cheese as memory medium, a theory still hotly contested by dairy purists and museum curators alike. You don't know. All you know is this: as the threads cross, a pattern begins to emerge. Not a map this time. A story. Yours. Theirs. Paris's. And in the very center of the loom, someone weaves the symbol of box 6. You haven't found it yet. But you already know what's inside. Because sometimes, the box isn't an object. It's a person. You begin carrying less. Your coat, once bulging with stitched scrolls, wax chips, shavings of rinds and a secret spoon, is now nearly empty. Just thread. One wedge. A soft pouch of salt. You walk lighter, slower, like you know you won't miss anything important. Because it'll find you. It's a strange moment in the city now, between secrecy and celebration. Everyone seems to know about the pocket maps, but no one admits it outright. You'll pass an old woman knitting in the shade of the Pantheon and notice her pearl stitches loop in spiral clusters. You'll hear a schoolboy rhyming verses about goats, but every 5th line maps to an old Cantal trade route. Even the government's in a weird mood. The royal archivist publishes a pamphlet entitled Cartes Lactées, Fiction or Folly, while a tax official quietly hosts a brie and cipher evening in his own drawing room. Surveillance relaxes. No more coat checks. No more cheese-sniffing mastiffs at the ports. Some think it's over. But you know better. Because you're starting to see them again, the blanks. Tiny moments where a taste goes nowhere. A map ends mid-stitch. A once vivid will now tastes grey. Flat. Like milk that never asked to be more. You start keeping a list. Locations. Dates. Textures. It becomes clear. A pattern is re-emerging, but in reverse. Someone or something is unmapping. At first, you suspect spoilage. Maybe too much public attention diluted the fermentation magic. Maybe the fungal heart is dormant. But then a parcel arrives. Wrapped in beeswax paper. No return mark. Inside, a scrap of soft linen. Half mold. Fragile. Box 6 of 9. You recognize the shape. It's part of the loom pattern from the silent tasting vault. But now it's fraying. Literally, fibers coming undone as if being erased. And stitched into the edge, in near invisible thread. It only survives if remembered. You sit with it for hours. Then you start moving again. Not to collect. Not to taste. To teach. You begin hosting something you call thread evenings. A few people at a time. You show them how to read the spirals, how to recognize the difference between a fold and a churn, how to hold their breath just right before biting into a rind. You let them bring their own cheeses. You make no rules, except, nothing labeled. They taste. Stitch. Listen. One night, a small boy brings a cheese that tastes like bells. No one knows what it is. The group names it clochette, and someone stitches a new symbol for it into the spiral. It becomes part of the map. That's how it survives. Because memory isn't stored in paper, or boxes, or even cheese. It lives in ritual. And you are now its keeper. You get a letter the next day. Hand-delivered by a woman in saffron-colored gloves. She doesn't speak. Just nods. The envelope is made of pressed rinds. Smells faintly of nutmeg and blue mold. Inside, a folded circle. The final node. Box 9. You were never meant to open it. You were meant to become it. So here you are. Not at the end of a story, exactly, but in the space beyond the spiral's last curve, where the thread doesn't stop but instead sinks quietly into the rind. You've shed the coat entirely now. You no longer need to carry the maps. Because the maps have grown inside you. Layered, soft, fermented into instinct. You walk a street and know what was sold here 3 winters ago. You touch a cellar wall and feel the imprint of a forgotten goat's milk tommy. And the city. It breathes differently now. Bakeries offer cheese not just by region, but by memory type. Regret-forward Roquefort. Dream-slow-and Brie. Ash-cured nostalgia with clover notes. Children learn to draw spirals before they write letters. Old men hum dairy roots like lullabies. The case du late Perdue has gone quiet again. Some say it vanished entirely. Others say it's gone global, sprouting in unexpected places. Underground tea houses in Kyoto, fog-salted hillsides in Ireland, a flooded basement in Queens. The cheese doesn't just come from Paris anymore. It returns to it, filtered through the memories of the world. You visit one final time. The spiral tasting vault, deep beneath the Rue Saint-Denis. The chairs are dusty. The loom is bare. But your name is stitched into the wall now, not carved, not written, stitched. Between the name of the violinist and the saffron-gloved messenger. There's a wedge waiting. It's warm. Somehow. Despite the cold air. It tastes like bread crust and first snowfall. And a little like goodbye. You leave your final thread. No ceremony. No monologue. Just a quiet tug and tie. And as you walk back into the Paris night, the city folds gently around you, like the rind of a cheese so aged, it's become more memory than matter. You'll still see maps, sometimes. On scarves. In dream crumbs. In a stranger's shoulder bag. But you don't chase them anymore. You recognize them. And that is enough. You feel your breath slow as the thread pulls taut behind you. No need to follow it anymore, it's holding the shape of everything you've lived through, curled gently into the folds of your mind like butter in warm bread. The city fades, but not in loss, only in volume. Its sounds soften, candle flickered and low, like distant music from a rooftop too far to climb. You remember the weight of the first pocket map, the smell of that spiral cellar, the sharp bite of ash-coated rind on your tongue. All of it still here. Just quieter now. The air around you thickens like cream left undisturbed, and even your thoughts begin to settle. Every bite, every thread, every quiet moment of wonder woven now into one long spiral that doesn't demand movement anymore. Just presence. You rest in that. The cheese vaults hum faintly beneath you. The thread remembers without asking. You are not the seeker anymore. You are the soil. The brine. The wax seal on a memory someone else will taste long after you've gone still. Let that thought wrap around you like linen. There's no need to move. You've mapped enough for one night. Let your breath stretch long and wide now. Let the spiral rest. Let the rind curl inward. And if the dreams that come tonight taste faintly of blue mold and time, well, that's just Paris saying goodnight.